What would you do if a homeless-looking old man walked into a sleek downtown bank and claimed he owned the entire building? Would you laugh? Call security? Film him for TikTok? Well, they laughed. But what they didn't know was that this old man carried something heavier than just a sack on his back. He carried receipts, rage, and a 70-year-old secret that would make the entire bank question everything. And when he opened that bag, let's just say the real economy crash happened inside. The automatic glass doors of Crown Ridge National Bank hissed open like a well-oiled secret. No alarms, no applause, just the slow, shuffling entrance of a man the world had long stopped noticing. He wasn't wearing a suit or carrying an iPad. He wore a frayed coat, stained at the collar, and a pair of shoes that looked like they'd marched through 3 generations of broken promises. Over one shoulder, he held a burlap sack, not a briefcase, a literal sack. Naturally, the receptionist smiled with the kind of tight-lipped grin perfected by people who pretend to care. "Good afternoon," she said sweetly, lowering her hand toward the security button under the desk. Michael Jackson didn't smile back. He didn't blink. He just kept walking, slow, steady, like a man who already knew how this would go. "Sir," she tried again, this time with more urgency. "This is a private financial institution." "I know," he said, stopping in the very center of the marble-floored lobby. "I built it." Now that got their attention. From the conference table, where mid-level executives were pretending to innovate, a laugh broke out. Another joined in. One man nearly spilled his mocha double shot onto a stack of client contracts. A junior teller leaned over and whispered, "We got ourselves a live one." Enter Derek, the ex-Marine, now glorified doorman with a badge and a short temper. He approached like someone trying to deal with a raccoon in a 5-star restaurant. "All right, sir," Derek said, arms folded. "Let's head outside. You're disrupting the air conditioning." Michael didn't move. Instead, he shifted the sack off his shoulder and let it drop with a dull thud onto the floor. The sound echoed, unsettling in its finality. "This bank," he repeated calmly, "belongs to me." The laughter quieted. Nervous glances flicked between staff. Someone asked under their breath, "Is this performance art?" The branch manager, Jasper Hawthorne III, finally arrived, his cologne preceding him like a warning. "What seems to be the issue here?" Michael didn't answer. He just reached into the sack. The air snapped tight. A woman near the door ducked behind a loan brochure. Derek's hand hovered near his belt, ready for drama. But instead of a weapon, Michael pulled out history. Bundles of old currency, marked with Crown Ridge's founding logo, discontinued for over half a century. A leather-bound ledger, its spine cracked but intact. A certificate, brittle with age, bearing a name that hadn't been spoken in that building for generations. Michael E. Jackson, founder. Silence collapsed over the room like a thunderclap. The receptionist blinked at the documents. Derek took a cautious step back, and Jasper, once so smug, reached forward with trembling hands. "Is this real?" "It's proof," Michael said, voice as cool as stone. "Proof of who built this place, of who got erased, and of just how stupid it is to think that power wears Armani." For the first time, the bank felt cold. For a building that prided itself on silence, Crown Ridge National Bank had never been so quiet. The faded papers now lay spread across the sleek marble counter, an ugly splash of truth in a place obsessed with polish. Jasper Hawthorne III, still clutching the ledger like it might bite him, flipped slowly through its pages. Dates, signatures, founding capital. One entry was labeled simply, "Initial investment, M.E. Jackson, 100%. In the corner of the room, the janitor had stopped mopping. Derek, the security guard, leaned in, brows furrowed. "This some kind of prank?" Michael didn't even look at him. "You think a man hauls a sack of 70-year-old banknotes for fun?" Just then, a voice broke the tension. "Wait a second," said a young black woman near the teller stations. Her name tag read Simone D. She stepped forward, eyes narrowing at the ledger. "I've seen that name before. It's engraved on the cornerstone of the building." Heads turned. Jasper looked like he'd swallowed a stapler. "Don't be ridiculous," he said, his tone brittle. "That cornerstone's just decorative." Simone gave him a side eye that could peel paint. I'm a history minor. Decorative stones don't list founding dates and founders. Michael gave her a nod of respect. You got a good memory, girl. Simone walked up to the counter and gently turned the old certificate toward her. Her eyes scanned it carefully. Michael E. Jackson. That's your full name. Yes, ma'am. A pause. Then louder. Y'all, this man's not crazy. He's Michael Jackson, not the one that sang. The one that built this damn bank. Laughter from earlier turned to murmurs. Some skeptical, some embarrassed. Jasper tried to recover. Look, even if this is somehow true, there are procedures, legal steps, ownership transfers, corporate restructuring. Michael cut him off. There were no legal steps, just backroom deals. A pen I never signed with, lawyers I couldn't afford, and a name you all buried so deep in your quarterly reports you hoped no one would find it. Simone shook her head. That's how it always goes. They love our hard work, just not our faces on the brochures. Jasper's lip twitched. Miss Davis, please return to your post. But no one moved. Not Simone, not the clients still standing near the counters, holding their breath and purses tighter than usual. One older man stepped forward and squinted at the certificate. I've lived in this town 50 years, he said. Used to be a Jackson family office right down on Edison Street. They say the son went missing in the 60s. Michael didn't smile. I didn't go missing. I got erased. Suddenly, a man in a tailored suit burst through the door. His voice boomed with urgency. Is there a problem? He wore a tag that said CFO Matthew Langford, and he had the hairline of someone used to winning court cases through exhaustion, not facts. Who let a homeless person into my bank? Simone bristled. Your bank. Langford barely acknowledged her, turning to Jasper. Get him out. Now. But before Jasper could even blink, Michael reached into the sack again, this time pulling out a photograph. Yellowed, cracked, but clear enough to show a young man in a suit standing on a dirt lot. Behind him, steel beams and a wooden sign that read Future Home of Crown Ridge National Bank. Michael tapped the photo and said, That's me. Before, they stole everything but my breath. Even Langford hesitated. I came here with truth, Michael said, his voice growing sharper. And if y'all don't believe that matters anymore, then maybe I picked the wrong day to walk in. Or maybe you picked the wrong century to bury a black man alive. Simone looked at Jasper, then at Langford. I'd think real carefully, she said, because whatever happens next, I'm recording. A pause. Then, click. Simone raised her phone. Michael raised his chin. And the bank? It felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see which lie would collapse first. For years, the staff at Union Hill Bank had operated like a well-oiled machine. Every morning, the tellers would greet each other with tired smiles, sip lukewarm coffee, and start their day behind glass counters and pristine marble floors. That day was supposed to be no different, until Michael Jackson stepped in with his ragged sack and a claim no one saw coming. By now, the whispers were bouncing around the lobby like tennis balls at a championship match. Did he really say he owns the bank? Maybe he's just confused. That sack looks like it belongs in a museum. But the moment the old man dropped it on the floor with a thud, those whispers dried up like spilled water on a summer sidewalk. The atmosphere went from mockery to unease faster than you could say ought it. Michael bent down, slowly, like he had all the time in the world, and untied the frayed rope around the sack. What came out was not loose change or tin cans, as some staffers quietly expected, but bundles, real, tangible bundles of money. Old money, bills so aged and rare they looked like they belonged in a vault, not a burlap bag. And then came the leather ledger. No one dared laugh now. Branch manager, Mr. Timothy Ashcroft, who just moments earlier had grinned like a politician at a ribbon cutting, suddenly looked like a man who realized he might be standing on someone else's carpet. Literally, his eyes locked on the ledger, and his face paled with every flip of its yellowed pages. You're telling me you're Michael Jackson? Ashcroft asked, his voice struggling to sound skeptical. Michael didn't blink. Yes, I am. I built this bank in 1952. And unless someone's got a better explanation, that's my name on every founding document you've got framed on that wall. You could hear a pin drop. Ashcroft leaned in, staring at the faded ink like it might suddenly vanish. The signatures matched. The names matched. The bank's founding history, a source of pride and ego for generations of executives, was at least in that moment, hanging by a thread woven straight from Michael's tattered past. Security guards shifted. Tellers stopped typing. A customer dropped his pen. And then, in a tone too calm for the chaos it caused, Michael said, "Funny thing about truth. It doesn't disappear just because it gets dusty." The moment held like a hell breath. People weren't just looking at an old man anymore. They were seeing the ghost of a legacy they'd buried in boardroom carpets and forgotten photo frames. This was a joke. It was a reckoning. And Michael Jackson wasn't here to play nice. Outside, life in Union Hill continued like nothing was happening. A bus wheezed down Main Street. Teenagers laughed over iced coffee. A jogger adjusted her earbuds. But inside the bank, time had warped. People weren't checking their watches anymore. They were watching history unfold in real time, and history looked a lot like an old black man with a sack and a stare that could cut marble. Michael Jackson stood still, his fingers resting on the edge of the dusty ledger, like it was a family photo album. And maybe in a way it was. The names listed, the handwritten entries, the shaky but official signatures, each one a breadcrumb leading back to him. Manager Timothy Ashcroft, whose entire banking career was built on protocol and pretense, had no protocol for this. He just stood there, holding documents that contradicted everything he thought he knew. The bank wasn't inherited. It was stolen. And worse, it was stolen from the wrong man. "We need to verify these documents," Ashcroft finally muttered, like a man trying to buy time he couldn't afford. Michael didn't even flinch. "You've already verified them," he said, pointing a weathered finger at the wall. "That's my name on your founding charter. That's my handwriting in your records. And unless you've got a resurrection department, I don't know who you thought C.K. Madison was, but that man was me." One of the tellers, a younger white guy with a carefully styled part and a nervous laugh, whispered, "Wait, did he just say C.K. Madison? That's like the guy the big conference room is named after." Exactly. For decades, C.K. Madison had been honored at Union Hill Bank as a founding figure, a quiet genius who had mysteriously disappeared sometime in the 1960s. His story had become part of the bank's lore. His name was on plaques, brochures, and even the employee training manual. But nobody ever asked why there were no photographs, no family, no estate, because the truth was never supposed to be found, until Michael showed up, alive, breathing, and furious. And while the staff scrambled to whisper about the logistics and Ashcroft stared down a legal nightmare in slow motion, Michael quietly pulled one more item from his sack, a small cassette recorder. He clicked play. What came out was grainy but clear, a conversation decades old. Two men, one of them Michael's voice, younger, stronger. The other? John Wallace, his former business partner. "Just sign it, Mike. It's only temporary. You said that last time. Come on, let me handle the board." "You're not handling it. You're erasing me." Click. Michael looked up. "That was the last time I stepped foot in this bank." Ashcroft's face turned the color of copier paper. This wasn't just about money now. It was about lies. Lies that built reputations, careers, and bonus checks. And with one bag and one tape recorder, Michael had turned their legacy into evidence. And this time, the cameras were watching. The walls of Union Hill Bank had never felt so thin. Outside, life carried on. Cars honked, someone spilled coffee on the curb, a teenager skateboard past, yelling into his phone. But inside felt like the prelude to a courtroom drama. Except the courtroom had marble floors, mint bowls at every desk, and an HR policy that had just aged 50 years in 5 minutes. Michael Jackson stood in the center like a monument no one remembered building, his presence now impossible to ignore. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't making threats. He didn't have to. He had receipts, literally and legally. Timothy Ashcroft, the bank manager whose job had mostly involved approving business loans and attending quarterly retreats, was now clutching a stack of documents that read like an indictment. "This deed," Michael said, pointing at the yellowed page with its brittle edges, "proves I never sold this building. This ledger shows I was the first to run it. And that tape, well, I assume you still have a legal department, Mr. Ashcroft? A beat of silence. A security guard, Stephen, whose name tag now felt hilariously underqualified, leaned toward Ashcroft and whispered, "Should we detain him?" "For what?" Ashcroft hissed. "Owning the place?" Michael chuckled dryly. "Now, there's a headline. Black man arrested for walking into his own bank. Might as well gift wrap it for the evening news." He wasn't wrong. A young woman near the back, one of the newer tellers, had already pulled out her phone, filming quietly. And though Ashcroft wanted to snatch it away and pretend the past wasn't being captured in 4K, he knew better. The internet would have this whole moment dissected before he could say damage control. Michael stepped closer to the front counter, placing the ledger on it like a sacred text. This building, these accounts, this marble, it's not just made of stone and interest rates. It's made of theft, erasure, and silence. The lobby was dead quiet. Even the clocks seemed to tick more slowly. Then a voice piped up. It was Carla, the senior loan officer, a black woman in her 50s who had worked at the bank for over 2 decades. Her voice didn't rise, but her words were sharp enough to break glass. "He's right. I've worked here long enough to know something's always felt off. We celebrate our founders every year, but we've never once said his name. Not on the plaques. Not in the records. And I work in records." Ashcroft's lips parted, but no words came. Carla walked up to Michael and extended her hand. "Mr. Jackson," she said, "on behalf of the people who should have known better, I'm sorry." Michael looked at her hand, then took it, and the crowd shifted. The silence cracked. A few employees began nodding. One stepped forward, then another. Some looked down, ashamed. Others looked ready to fight. Either way, the room had changed. Michael wasn't just a man with documents anymore. He was a mirror, and nobody liked what they saw. Michael Jackson sat in the back office now, not as a guest, certainly not as an intruder, but as something far more dangerous, a man whose truth had outlived their lies. The office, once belonging to the regional manager, was a corporate shrine to self-importance. Polished oak desk, framed certificates, a bookshelf with titles like Leading Through Profit and Legacy, the power of institutional wealth. Irony has never looked so expensive. Timothy Ashcroft stood in the corner, pale as the wallpaper. He had called corporate, of course. What else could he do? When your job is to protect the institution, and someone walks in with proof that the institution is built on stolen bricks, your options dwindle fast. "He can't actually take the building," Ashcroft muttered to himself. "It's too complicated. There are legal layers, generational ownership, public trust. We can't just—" Michael, seated across from him, sipped a glass of lukewarm water. "You're not talking to me," he said calmly. "You're talking to your denial." Outside the glass walls, the mood had changed. Employees no longer laughed. No more whispered dismissals. Carla had become an unofficial spokesperson for the staff, organizing a small pile of Michael's old documents in the front lobby. It was more museum than bank now. Even customers were still standing around, unsure whether to close their accounts or grab popcorn. One man in a navy suit tried to leave quietly, but paused at the sight of Michael through the glass. He turned to the young teller beside him. "That really him?" he whispered. "The founder?" "Depends who you ask," she replied. "But the paper says yes. And nobody's arguing with the paper." Back in the office, Michael leaned forward, eyes fixed on Ashcroft. "You know what hurts most?" he asked. Ashcroft said nothing. "It's not that they stole it. It's that they made me feel crazy for knowing it." Ashcroft finally spoke. "Even if all of this is true, it doesn't matter. Do you really think people care about a name on an old deed? This building isn't yours anymore. It belongs to a system." Michael's gaze sharpened. "That's where you're wrong. It always belonged to a system. A system that made sure black men like me never kept what we built. You think I'm here to take the building back? No. I'm here to make sure everyone knows how it was taken in the first place." Ashcroft swallowed. The words hit harder than legal threats ever could. A knock interrupted them. Carla opened the door. She held a letter, printed from the regional director's office. Her face was unreadable. "They want you to step aside," she said, addressing Ashcroft, "until further review." Ashcroft blinked. They can't. They just did," Carla replied. Michael didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He simply stood, collected his sack of documents, and walked toward the door. As he passed Ashcroft, he paused. "This place might keep its name," Michael said, voice low, "but now it carries mine, too." He stepped into the lobby. The employees turned to look. For the first time, nobody saw a trespasser. They saw the man who built the place. And for the first time in 60 years, Union Hill Bank belonged to the truth. It took less than 24 hours for the story to explode. Not because Michael Jackson called a press conference. Not because he threatened lawsuits or posted a dramatic video on social media. He didn't need to. The staff at Union Hill Bank did it for him. By morning, the story had leaked, not to a major media outlet, but to a small community blog run by a former employee named Jasmine Lee. One quiet article titled, "The Man Who Owns the Bank," appeared online around 7:15 a.m., along with a grainy photo of Michael standing by the lobby with a sack of old bills at his feet. It was enough. By noon, the article had been shared 20,000 times. By 3 p.m., someone had posted a screenshot of the 1951 deed Michael had dropped on the counter. By 6 p.m., a local news van was parked across the street. And by 9 p.m., corporate board members were in full panic mode. Inside the high-rise offices of UHB Holdings, the parent company of Union Hill Bank, chaos wore a navy blue suit. Executives huddled in private calls. Lawyers drafted early damage control memos, and PR teams tried to spin a narrative that hadn't even stopped evolving. But it was one email, just one, that really flipped the script. Subject line, "You should know what we did." It was unsigned. It included several scanned documents from the 1970s, paperwork showing the transfer of ownership from Michael Jackson to one John William Ashcroft. No sale price, no legal notary, just a shaky signature and a board vote that never legally happened. A follow-up email came 5 minutes later with the subject line, "Check the basement files." The boardroom fell silent. One executive, a woman in her 50s with years of institutional loyalty, looked pale as she opened the attachments. If this is real," she said, "we've been operating on stolen property for decades." The CEO leaned back, voice cold. "Who else has seen this?" "The internet," someone muttered. The silence that followed was heavier than any lawsuit. Back at the branch, Michael stood at a quiet window, sipping lukewarm coffee. Carla approached with a printed copy of the blog article in her hand. "You've gone viral," she said. Michael didn't flinch. So did the flu. Carla cracked a smile. "They're calling you the ghost of Union Hill." He glanced at her. "Let them. Ghosts don't disappear. They haunt. Do you want to give a statement to the press?" Michael shook his head. "I've said everything I needed to say." In 1951, that night, corporate sent a memo to all branches. It read, "Union Hill Bank is undergoing a legacy ownership audit. Effective immediately, all media inquiries should be directed to the Legal Affairs Division. No apology, no acknowledgement, just red tape and silence." But silence speaks, too. And this one screamed, "We're guilty." By the next morning, Union Hill Bank no longer felt like a financial institution. It felt like a crime scene wrapped in mahogany. Michael Jackson showed up before sunrise. Not with a lawyer, not with a news crew, but with one item he hadn't revealed the day before. A brass key, long old, etched with the number 001. It jingled in his hand as he stepped past the reception desk, past the tellers, past the very people who had laughed at him just days ago. Nobody dared speak this time. Nobody told him to wait outside. They watched him like they were watching the return of myth. "I need access to the original vault," Michael said, directing his voice at the newly humbled branch manager, Mr. Temple. Temple's lips parted, but no words came out. His eyes darted to the security guard, who wasn't Stephen anymore. He'd been quietly reassigned. This one didn't move either. "I said," Michael repeated, calmly but with steel in his voice, "open the vault." Temple swallowed. "Sir, that vault hasn't been used in decades. It was sealed before I even—" Michael raised the key. "Good thing I never gave it back." There was a long pause. Then Temple turned, motioned to a younger assistant, and together they led Michael down a narrow hallway behind the teller booths, one that most employees had forgotten even existed. The air grew colder as they descended the stairs. The vault door stood like a monument at the end of the passageway, thick steel with faded paint and a plaque that still read, Union Hill Vault, EST 1951. Do not open without board authorization. Funny, Michael said. I authorized it. 73 years ago. He inserted the key. It turned with a groan, the metal resisting like a secret that didn't want to be remembered. The vault cracked open. What they saw inside made Mr. Temple stumble back. Old ledgers. Ledger after ledger. Handwritten records with initials, transactions, minutes of board meetings. Some were in near-perfect condition. Others had yellowed, edges curling. But the most important item sat on a dusty shelf, covered by a faded velvet cloth. Michael reached for it slowly, like retrieving a memory. He pulled back the cloth to reveal a box. Inside were the original articles of incorporation, the handwritten charter naming Michael Jackson as founder and majority shareholder, letters from investors dating back to 1950, thanking him for giving black entrepreneurs a chance when no one else would. In a torn photograph, Michael, in his 30s, standing with John Ashcroft, smiling. Before the betrayal, Temple stared, speechless. You still think I wandered in here confused? Michael asked. Temple looked down. That's when Carla arrived. She followed them, curious. She saw the photo, the documents, the truth. Michael turned to her. Now I need one more thing. Anything, she said quietly. A meeting with the board. They're not going to want to see you, Temple muttered. Michael chuckled. They're not going to have a choice. Because while the past had been buried in a vault, the future was knocking at the boardroom door. And this time, it had the key. The boardroom at Union Hill Bank was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows. A 12-foot mahogany table. Leather chairs worth more than most people's rent. And portraits on the walls. Oil paintings of the so-called Founding Fathers. All white. All smiling. None of them is Michael Jackson. That morning, those smiles looked more like sneers. Michael stepped inside, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that hadn't been worn in years, but still fit like it had been waiting for this day. Carla walked beside him, holding a leather binder. Inside, the ledgers, the incorporation papers, the receipts of betrayal. The current board of directors sat stiffly. 6 members. 4 men, 2 women. All watching him like he'd just brought a bomb into their sanctuary. Mr. Jackson, said a gray-haired man at the head of the table. Chairman Gregory Moore. We've been briefed on yesterday's disturbance. While we sympathize with your situation, we have protocols and legal channels. You can't just walk in here and... Michael cut him off with one sentence. I own this bank. The room froze. Carla slid the binder onto the table and opened it like a prosecutor revealing evidence at trial. She laid out the original articles of incorporation, the signed documents, the bylaws, the board's own rules. Gregory's face twitched. These are old papers, one board member scoffed. None of this has been legally filed in decades. Because you made sure of that, Michael said, his voice calm. Because your predecessors buried my name, refiled under forged documents, and rebranded my legacy as your own. This is absurd, another snapped. Even if you were who you say you are, the statute of limitations is irrelevant, Carla interrupted, because fraud doesn't expire. And we have proof, including a forensic handwriting analysis that matches John Ashcroft's signature on a falsified transfer of ownership, filed 3 days after Mr. Jackson's disappearance. You disappeared, Moore said, almost pleading now. You abandoned the company. I was locked out. Framed. The board voted without me while I was in a hospital recovering from what your founder's goons called a regrettable accident. The room fell silent. Michael stepped forward and placed a small object on the table. The brass vault key. I never gave this up. You locked me out of my own home. And now I've brought the deed back through the front door. Moore leaned back, the blood draining from his face. You want money. Is that it? Michael raised an eyebrow. Money? I had money before you stole it. I want the truth back. I want the name on the glass outside to reflect who built this place. I want the portrait on that wall to be the real founder. He pointed to the oil paintings. You want a war? Another member hissed. You'll get one. We have lawyers. PR, connections. Michael smiled, not with arrogance, but with certainty. And I have time. 73 years of it. He turned to leave, not waiting for their permission. As he reached the door, Carla glanced back at the stunned room. We'll be filing for full reinstatement of ownership by the end of today. You can fight us in court if you'd like. But the public already knows the truth. Outside the boardroom, the press was already waiting, because someone had leaked the story. And Union Hill Bank was about to become national news for all the wrong reasons. By the following week, the name Michael Jackson wasn't just a rumor whispered in break rooms or dismissed in bank offices. It was trending. Headline after headline told the same story. Old man returns to claim the bank he built. Decades-long cover-up exposed at Union Hill. Founding black banker erased from history. And the country? It was watching. At first, Union Hill's board tried damage control. They issued carefully worded statements, blamed clerical errors, and insisted the documents Michael presented were inconclusive. But the internet didn't care for their PR spin. Not when Carla had already uploaded high-resolution scans of the original deed, ledger entries, and a signed confession from one of the board's oldest surviving members, a man who admitted, from his hospice bed, that the bank was indeed stolen. TV crews started camping outside the bank. Customers started closing their accounts. Protesters lined the sidewalk, and painted across cardboard signs were three unmistakable words. Give it back. Inside the building, something strange started happening. Employees who had mocked Michael now avoided his gaze. Others apologized, silently, by handing him stacks of forgotten archives or quietly nodding as he walked past. Then came a court date. Michael didn't want it televised. He didn't care for drama. But the judge's ruling, when it came, felt like thunder in a bottle. Based on overwhelming documentation and corroborated evidence, the judge declared, "We rule in favor of Mr. Michael Jackson as the rightful founder and legal co-owner of Union Hill Bank." Silence. Then, cheers from the courtroom gallery. Gregory Morse slumped in his seat like a deflated balloon. He had spent decades climbing a ladder built on a lie. And now, the bottom had fallen out. 2 weeks later, a press conference was held in front of the bank's grand columns. Michael stood at the podium, gray suit pressed, sack slung over his shoulder as a symbol of what he had carried all these years. Carla stood beside him, smiling proudly. Reporters buzzed with questions, but Michael held up a hand. "I don't want revenge," he said. "I want restoration. This bank was built by black hands in a time when we weren't allowed to dream this big. Its time and name on the building reflected that." He turned toward the facade. The maintenance crew had already peeled off the old sign. In its place, a gleaming new name was revealed. Jackson Union Trust. Applause erupted. Some cried. Some just stood in stunned silence. And in that moment, no one saw an old man with a ragged sack. They saw a founder reclaiming his legacy. As the crowd began to disperse, a young boy tugged on Michael's sleeve. "Mr. Jackson, are you really the man who built the whole bank?" Michael bent down, smiled, and whispered, "I never stopped building. I just had to come back and remind them. And if you've stayed with us through this journey, if Michael's story touched you, angered you, or reminded you that truth doesn't age, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to Story Precious for more untold stories of redemption, justice, and powerful comebacks. Because we believe the quietest voices often carry the loudest truths, and some stories deserve to be remembered.